During the 1930s, severe droughts turned American farmland into dust. This massive environmental collapse forced hundreds of thousands to abandon their homes and head west. When we picture those migrants today, one specific image usually comes to mind. Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother has become the defining visual record of the era, cementing the idea of the destitute white farmer fleeing the dead prairies. Look closely at the original negative, and there is a stray detail in the lower right corner, the mother's thumb gripping the tent pole. Lange instructed her assistant to erase that thumb, believing it disrupted the aesthetic balance of the composition. This small act of retouching shows that the camera's lens was being treated as a canvas rather than a mirror. It suggests the iconic images of this period were carefully composed to serve a specific vision, one we are only now beginning to see past. Dorothea Lange didn't take this photograph by accident. She was working for the Farm Security Administration, a federal agency tasked with drumming up public support for New Deal relief programs. Their bureaucratic mandate relied on finding and distributing images of highly sympathetic victims to the American press. The woman in the photograph is Florence Owens Thompson. While her face became the prototype for the white Midwestern migrant, she was a full-blooded Cherokee from Indian Territory in what is now Oklahoma. The details of her life also conflict with the government's implied timeline. Thompson had lived in California since 1926, years before the Depression began, and instead of seeking out government aid, she was actually terrified of it. She worried that if she accepted federal help, the government would use her poverty as a reason to take her children away. As a piece of art, the photograph is a masterpiece, but its historical function was to act as propaganda. It provided a clean, digestible narrative that obscured the complex reality of who was actually being displaced. To see exactly who was moving, we have to set aside the curated photographs and look at the hard data. The 1940 U.S. Census was the first in American history to formally ask citizens where they had lived 5 years prior, giving us a massive statistical record of internal migration. In modern economics, there is a concept known as trapped populations. The theory suggests that severely disadvantaged groups are usually too poor to relocate when natural disasters strike, because the costs of moving are simply too high. This chart shows internal migration rates by race during the 1930s drought, based on a National Bureau of Economic Research analysis of the 1940 census. The data overturns the trapped population theory. It shows Black individuals exposed to drought were significantly more likely to migrate. Isolating the rural sector directly hit by the drought, the gap widens. Black rural migration spiked to 4.1%, while white rural migration was just 1.7%. The cause of this massive migration spike was a specific New Deal policy called the Agricultural Adjustment Act. While the government used photographs of white mothers to sell relief programs to the public, the AAA subsidized landowners to reduce their crop yields. This federal money incentivized white landowners to evict their Black sharecroppers right in the middle of a historic drought. The collision of a severe climate shock with federal economic policy forced the era's most systematically disadvantaged group to become its most active climate refugees. You simply won't find this reality in the era's famous visual record. The legacy of the Great Depression is split into two records. On one side, we have the visible, curated narrative reality sold by the government. On the other, we have the invisible, statistical reality recorded by the census. Creating a politically useful victim requires a deliberate narrowing of focus. The messy, complex realities of poverty and displacement are often removed to make a story easier to consume. Curation happened at every level of this story. Lange removed a thumb to fix a composition. The FSA omitted Thompson's heritage to preserve a narrative. And ultimately, the era's visual record ignored the hundreds of thousands of Black Americans who were actually displaced. To understand the mechanics of climate migration, both during the Dust Bowl and today, we have to look past the manicured images. We have to interrogate the raw data, because the most vulnerable victims are often the ones left out of the frame.